One TV ad, a few old words from Ronald Reagan, and suddenly Donald Trump slammed the brakes on trade talks with Canada. But this time, Carney didn't dodge it or soften it. He called it out calmly, clearly, and in public. What followed wasn't just a trade spat. It was Canada refusing to let a U.S. president rewrite history and bully its way through another lie.
It's a $75 million ad campaign which has seriously backfired. The Ontario government's anti-tariffs ad prompted an angry Donald Trump to terminate all trade talks with Canada.
The Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada has fraudulently used an advertisement which is fake, featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs. Tariffs are very important to national security and the economy of the USA. Based on their egregious behavior, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated.
When news broke that President Donald Trump had abruptly ended all trade negotiations with Canada, it wasn't because of tariffs or trade policy in the usual sense. It wasn't because of economic data or conferences or formal demands from Ottawa. It was because of a TV ad, a provincial advertisement from Ontario that struck at the heart of a major political lie. The ad used words from former U.S. President Ronald Reagan to expose something that had been slipping under the radar.
America's jobs and growth are at stake.
Trump's claim that Reagan supported tariffs. Reagan didn't. In fact, Reagan advocated for free trade and warned against isolationist policies, including the dangers of trade barriers and retaliatory tariff wars. But Trump's false assertion, rooted more in campaign talking points than historical accuracy, was thrust into the spotlight. And once it was, the whole dynamic between Canada and the US shifted in a very public way.
Spearheaded by Ontario's Premier Doug Ford, an open critic of Donald Trump, the ad featured a 1987 Ronald Reagan speech warning of the consequences of high tariffs on foreign imports.
Let's be absolutely clear on one thing. The Ontario ad didn't invent the idea of free trade. It pointed back to a pivotal moment in U.S.-Canada history. In 1987, Ronald Reagan delivered remarks supporting free and fair trade and defending open markets at a time when protectionism was gaining traction in some circles. His leadership laid early groundwork for what became the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement. Reagan's speeches and statements at the time stressed reducing tariffs and opening trade markets between Canada and the United States as well. As a matter of fact, his 1987 remarks even included praise for lower trade barriers and cooperation that would benefit both nations with more stable economic growth. When Ontario's ad ran clips of Reagan saying that and then contrasted them with Trump's narrative, it caught the claim of protectionist support flat-footed. Suddenly, a provincial political spot didn't just remain a local street campaign. It quickly molded into a hot piece of international diplomatic war. As for Trump, he didn't take the ad lying down. Interpreting it as a misrepresentation, he halted all ongoing trade negotiations with Canada, accusing the ad of misusing Reagan's legacy. Media coverage reported this sudden freeze weeks before expected talks were to resume, noting the ad as the immediate trigger. And the immediate results? Trade negotiations between Canada and the United States, with deep economic relations in hot water. Over 75% of Canada's exports traditionally flow to the US, making it by far Canada's largest trading partner. But Carney's response was nothing like the heated rhetoric from Washington. In a calm, fact-driven address, Prime Minister Mark Carney dismantled the narrative, not with an angry speech, but with historical context and economic clarity. He reminded Canadians of the real history of free trade advocacy from Reagan's era, and how open markets had benefited both nations for decades. Carney's message was simple but powerful. Canada's trade strategy will not bend to misinformation or political tantrums. Carney didn't just correct the record about Reagan's stance, he used the moment to reaffirm Canada's broader global approach. Canada was not going to be held hostage by the mood swings of one president or one advertising campaign. Instead, Carney reiterated a vision already forming in Ottawa, one based on strength and resilience. His government is pushing aggressive new trade and economic partnerships across Europe, Asia, and emerging markets. At recent summits, Carney has emphasized the need to reduce reliance on any single partner and build a more balanced international portfolio. This means doubling Canada's exports outside the United States over the next decade, strengthening ties in Southeast Asia and with trading blocs like the EU and Mercosur, and expanding cooperation on defense, technology, and energy. It's a strategy meant to protect Canadian jobs, industries, and sovereignty, not just from trade disputes, but from the kind of political volatility that arises when economic policy is used as leverage in unrelated cultural or media conflicts. Now, take a moment here and think about the economy at a human level. Canada's steel, auto, and natural resource sectors have felt the sting from previous rounds of U.S. tariffs and threats. The auto industry alone supports hundreds of thousands of jobs on both sides of the border, and when 25% tariffs hit auto imports, as they did in March 2025, Carney called them a direct attack on Canada. These kinds of measures can tear through supply chains and increase costs for workers and consumers alike. They're not abstract policy options. They affect daily lives. By doubling down on global trade, Carney is saying Canada won't let another moment like this define its economic future. This isn't just about proving Trump wrong on historical facts about Reagan. It's about crafting a future where Canada's prosperity doesn't depend on the temperament of one administration. Carney's response was measured, informed, and forward-looking, a sharp contrast to the narrative coming out of the U.S. administration. Rather than attacking Trump personally, he pointed to facts, historical precedent, and Canada's broader global strategy. And those facts matter. Reagan's advocacy for free trade wasn't absolute in every corner of his tenure. There were moments when his administration imposed certain quotas or tariffs in specific disputes. But the spirit of his 1987 message, free, fair trade, and economic integration, is indisputable. In that context, Trump's characterization was not just misleading. It ran counter to a historical trajectory that shaped the modern Canada-US relationship. Carney used that discrepancy not to escalate tensions, but to clarify them. And in doing so, he recast Canada's role on the world stage. This is a country that remembers its history accurately, speaks its truth confidently, and refuses to be bullied by misrepresentation. The freeze in negotiations may be temporary, and economists still hope for eventual resolution on key trade issues between Canada and the United States. But the narrative has shifted. Canada's strategy now openly embraces change, advancement, and a shift towards modern trade for the global rules-based trade order, an approach that resonates from ASEAN to the EU. By the way, Canada isn't just talking about new partners, it's locking them in. Trade deals with countries like Indonesia and active talks with ASEAN show that Canada is widening its reach and moving forward with purpose. At the same time, Canada's proving it can protect its own interests, even when that means pushing back against false claims from a powerful neighbor. For Canadians watching, this moment shows what modern economic leadership looks like: fast, confident, and rooted in facts, not noise. Because history matters, and countries built on truth don't crack under pressure.